Our next speaker is Rizel Scarlett. Yeah, she's a staff developer advocate at TBD, and she's also an advisor at G-Code House, an organization that teaches women of color and non-binary people of color to code. It's really awesome. Yeah. And on a personal note, Seattle is the very last stop that she's traveling to. She was at 2 conferences before, and now she is almost ready to go home. So let's make it good. Let's give her all the attention and love that she deserves. And also, let her know what you think about Bridgerton. Let's give it up for Rizel.
Thank you. All right, I have a lot to say and not a lot of time, so I'm going to jump straight into it. Okay, so I have like a mildly spicy take. It's nothing too crazy, but in my opinion, there are like 3 types of technologists. You have the technologist that likes to keep up with every single tech trend. So right now, they're like, I have to learn AI to stay employable. Before that, they were like, I need to learn Web3. And before that, maybe like the cloud or something. But then on the other side of the spectrum, you have those folks that are really confident in their skill set, so confident that they're not willing to learn any new trends. They're like, yeah, I learned COBOL and I learned Pascal in like 1992 BC. I'm not learning anything else. But then you have the third type of technologist that's informed about the different industry changes, but they only adopt new technologies if they feel like it aligns with their career interests and like their personal goals. So today we're going to like quickly talk about like the trends of the past, present, and future, both in tech and like in culture. And what I hope that you end up taking away is just tips on how to code with AI, since that's one of like the latest trends right now. But before I do that, I'll quickly introduce myself. My name's Rizel Scarlett. I'm a staff developer advocate at a company called TBD. Yeah, that's the real name. It's a real company. And it's actually a business unit within Block. So Block has multiple business units like Cash App and Tidal and Square and Afterpay, and then also TBD. Now, you might be saying, why will I listen to a girl that works at a funny name company about Copilot and coding with AI? But I'm pretty obsessed with Copilot. In fact, for like 2 years, I worked at GitHub, focused on advocating for GitHub Copilot. It was really fun. But besides that, I have like a small secret to share with you guys. And that is that for all my life, or most of my life, I always feel like I'm a little bit behind the trends. But I have an excuse, okay? So hear me out. We're gonna like travel through my life from like the early 2000s to 2010s. In 2000, I immigrated to the US. I don't know if people have, like if there's any immigrants here, but anyone here immigrated here, or maybe their parents have? Okay, cool. So maybe you understand the struggle of adapting to like the culture of America. And so, for me, I noticed it early on. I had communication barriers. Even though I always spoke English, my parents actually are from the only English-speaking country in South America, but I still felt like I spoke like a different type of English. So in kindergarten, for example, I would say the word tree for like the number, right? And my friends will be like, it's 3, and I'm like, that's what I'm saying, tree, the number tree. So I learned that I needed to like assimilate and adapt to the lifestyle to basically survive the school system. And I realized everybody that's kind of fitting in, they have cool cell phones. So I was like, listen, parents, I need a pink Motorola Razr or a Sidekick, okay? Like, I'm gonna need one of those. And they were like, yeah, you're gonna get this. It's a prepaid Kyocera. And I was like, dang. All I could do on it was like call my mom and be like, yeah, I got on the bus. Yeah, I got off the bus. That's all I could do on there. But I didn't let that stop me. I was still going to like try to adapt and fit in. So I tried to learn from different examples. So for example, I would go on YouTube and I would search up how to do this cool new dance, whatever the dance was at the time that I would try to figure out. And I finally learned how to dance to You're a Jerk and do I think it was called the reject and pin drop, and I was like, finally, I got it. And I told my friends, and they're like, yeah, we kind of moved on. We're doing Teach Me How to Dougie. We're doing Cat Daddy. I'm like, dang, I missed out. But one thing that was always reliable for me in gaining cultural context was TV, right? I personally feel like the 90s to 2000s was this golden age of kids' TV. I don't know what the kids these days are watching. Maybe Bluey, that seems decent, but besides that, I feel like, dang, I don't know if they got a lot of good stuff. But my parents, they were really strict. They want me to only watch educational shows. So while it was nighttime and they were sleeping, I had to sneak watch That's So Raven and Mean Girls and Bratz and The Buzz on Maggie. And I always thought of my journey in adapting to culture as being a weakness, but I found that it actually was a more transferable skill for me to basically survive and thrive in the tech industry. Right, so I found out hey, I've been able to adapt really quickly and learn new technologies, and in 2016 I joined the tech industry, and I felt a little bit behind because tech moves really quickly, but I was able to catch up pretty quickly, and I ended up working as a developer advocate at GitHub, and they were all talking about GitHub Copilot. It went from technical preview to public beta, and the company was we're shifting towards AI. They were really emphasizing it. I was like, okay, so I'm paying attention to this trend that my company's focusing on. Our parent company also made this big investment in OpenAI. So like any good developer advocate, I was like, let me see the developer sentiment around GitHub Copilot. So I went to a very reliable site called twitter.com, or I guess X, whatever, I don't call it that. But when I looked it up, it didn't look like the sentiment was as good as I expected. There's one guy saying, I started playing with Copilot and OCaml, and it's very bad. And I was like, oh, yikes. And then another person's like, yeah, it doesn't feel like a peer programmer. And then a professor is confused about Copilot, and he's like, is this stealing the code from my textbook? Because this is the same code that's in my textbook. I'm like, And then another person said, GitHub Copilot is great for code bases where random guesses are more accurate than your type system. Burn, right? So there was some positive sentiment, but I did notice that some people weren't really liking it. And it could have been discouraged by this, but I was like, this is my opportunity to be up to date with a trend and help people catch up. So, of course, on my own, I had to do a little bit of investigation and build with Copilot myself, see if these complaints were legit. And some of them were definitely legit, but my conclusion was more that we needed more tips on how to guide people to use Copilot effectively. And what I learned is some of the cultural things that I learned in my life around communication barriers, people were kind of struggling with that as well with GitHub Copilot. So, like I mentioned, communication barriers. A lot of times people are they're trying to tell GitHub Copilot what to do, but it's not doing it. So, things to note is that the output for generative AI tools is non-deterministic, and that means your results will always be unpredictable, but we can use prompt engineering to basically guide and refine that unpredictability into meaningful outcomes. And when I say prompt engineering, I don't mean anything crazy. I just mean the practice of using prompts to get the output you want. And in our case, it would be a block of code or a statement in the form of a comment. So what I normally do, not everybody does this, it's okay, but I usually, if I have a app or a directory or file that has nothing in it, I put a really huge comment, and I give it a lot of context. So I'm going to pause this video before it moves on. Here's an example, right? So I told GitHub Copilot, I want to make a Markdown editor in Next.js, and I want to have support for basic things like headers and bold and italics, and I actually don't want to make this Markdown editor from scratch. I want to use the React Markdown NPM package. And what ends up happening is GitHub Copilot just does everything I say I want it to do. I don't type anything. I just press tab the whole time, and it creates a component for me. And once it's done, on the right side, we should see it rendered in my browser. And it will be an ugly Markdown editor, but it will be one that works. So once it gets there. All right, cool. So we can see that headers are working, right? And then I'll try bullet points out. That's working too. And I can also try out like italics or bold. And I'm like, cool, it worked. GitHub Copilot was able to follow that direction. I also think that there's an area where developers can sometimes struggle to adapt to this new workflow of coding with AI, right? We all have like our way of like, hey, this is how I like to code. But I think what I've learned is there was a study, and it takes people about 7 days to kind of adapt to working with GitHub Copilot. And the way I thought of it is I kind of went back to when I first learned to code. I had to learn how to like kind of have a programmer's brain and how how computers think. And I went back to like the robot make me a sandwich activity. Has anyone ever played that in like their, okay, few people, right? I played that in like my coding boot camp. And for folks who don't know how it works, it's like an activity where your teacher pretends to be a robot, and you can't just be like, hey, yo, make me a sandwich. Because first off, that's rude. Second off, the robot doesn't know what a sandwich is or how to do that. So you kind of have to go step by step of very specific instructions, saying things like open the bag of bread or take the first two slices of bread out the bag, lay the slices side by side on the counter, spread peanut butter on one slice of bread with a butter knife. Right? So you have to be very specific like that. And the takeaway from that activity is supposed to be that computer programs use algorithms, which are just a set of instructions. And they're better at taking like one step of a very specific instruction at a time. And I think GitHub Copilot works similarly. It's a computer program. So I often tell people, like, when you're doing your prompts, try to iterate on it and make it more specific. For example, I hope you guys can see this, right? I write a comment that says, get data from API. And Copilot's like, okay, what API, what data do you want to get? So it just sets up a random Express server because it has no clue what I'm talking about. But when I get a little bit more specific and I say, okay, use like the JSON placeholder API and pass in user IDs to return the users as a JSON object, then it's able to give me more optimal results. I feel like I was talking really fast. Okay. The next step is like basically helping Copilot to learn from example, right? Just like I was learning from YouTube examples on how to dance or whatever, AI models often use different ways to train, and here are some, like zero-shot learning, one-shot learning, and then few-shot learning. So with zero-shot learning, a model is expected to correctly make predictions for tasks it's never explicitly seen during training. Whereas one-shot learning, a model is expected to learn from only one example. And with few-shot learning, it's trained on a variety of tasks and learns how to learn new tasks like quickly. Now, when you hear that, maybe it went over your head and you're like, who cares? So I have a bit of an analogy. Anyone here a gamer? Cool. I am not a gamer. I just want you guys to raise your hand. Okay. But if you're, like, since you're a gamer, right, if you're expected to do zero-shot learning, perhaps you approach a game you've never played before, but without playing, you have to use your past experience to devise strategies on how to beat that game. But with one-shot learning, you basically play the new game once, and after one match, you're expected to face any opponent or play any character competently. And then with few-shot learning, you get like 2 to 5 matches in the game, and you use those matches to help you fully navigate the game. So hopefully that helps you understand it a little better. And of course, GitHub Copilot already has like sample data and examples, but it doesn't hurt to give it a few more examples. So I'm going to show you in this demo as well. Here, at first I say map through an array of objects to transform data. GitHub Copilot doesn't really give me a good answer. It just says undefined, undefined. That went a little fast, but that was like the result in the terminal. But if I get a little bit more specific, let me pause it so we don't go too fast. I basically say, all right, I actually want to extract the names of this data array, and what I want as the output is an array with 3 strings that say John, Jane, and Bob. And once I say that, GitHub Copilot's like, oh, okay, I get you. And if we look at the terminal, it should be able to print that out for me. Cool, did it. So last thing is like helping Copilot gain context. Copilot usually can gain context. I think this is supposed to be number 4, but whatever. Copilot can gain context from open files within your code base, so I often suggest use 1 or 2, not too many, because then it will get like lower quality. But here's what I mean, right? So in one like file or open tab, you can have your the definition of your functions, right? I have fetch data and post data. And if you want to reference or call those functions, open a neighboring tab, and it's able to basically reference that without you really typing. It may know like what parameters and arguments you want to use, or like how the function should basically work. All right, so I gave all of these tips, and I always wonder, like, is GitHub Copilot working for me better because I'm doing these small little demos, or because I'm in the GitHub ecosystem? But even as I left GitHub to go to TBD, I found that GitHub Copilot was helpful to me, right? Because first, I was feeling pretty good about myself. I'm like, yeah, I went from junior to mid-level to staff, like, see me out here. But then I realized, oh my God, I was working with a platform that I'm so used to and experienced with, but now I'm working with a platform that I don't really know at all, so I got a little nervous, and I had to learn to adapt a bit, right? So I started picking up some of the technical parts, and as a developer advocate, it's kind of my job to get people excited about different technical tools, and I was able to get them excited around some of the features that TBD is putting out, like web standards and using digital IDs. If you were in my workshop, you got to hear about that. But I always lose people when I mention Web 5. People are like, what's that? I don't want to hear about that, and understandably so. And then when I try to explain that it's about data ownership, I realize people prefer convenience over data ownership. And I was making a lot of different apps, like a chat app, a photo gallery, and people were like, I don't really care. But recently, I was thinking about, like, what are apps that people might care about owning their data? And one of them, for me, is like a pregnancy tracking app. As soon as I downloaded one, like, I just get mad TikToks and Reels about pregnancy, and I'm like, dang, I don't want to see this every day. I'm good. And I was also thinking, it's got to be annoying for people who maybe have infertility issues or like miscarriages or something. So we're not going to build like a whole pregnancy app, but we're going to see if Copilot can help me create like a pregnancy due date calculator. We're not going to style it or anything, just the logic, just so you can see how I work with Copilot. Hopefully, it doesn't embarrass me. If it does, we'll like figure out how to like debug with it and stuff like that. So I already wrote my big, oh, you guys can't see this. Hold on. Switching. All right, so I already wrote my big comment that I talk about writing, right? So I told it like, hey, I want to create a pregnancy due date calendar. I want to have a date picker. I want it to show like how far along you'll be in weeks and maybe calculate the trimester. So I'm just going to press enter, and hopefully it does something normal. Let's see. So it looks cool. It's doing some imports, and it's creating a component right now. That's cool. So if I save it, will it update? Is it running? It's probably not running. Oh, I didn't even read the error. Thank you. I didn't export it. Thank you, guys. 31? Oh, thank you. I did not know what you guys were talking about. Thank you. Okay. So let's say it could be wrong, like the calculation. We know Copilot and AI is not always right. So let's see, like if I pick a date, I'm just going to pick a random date, August, I don't know. All right, 8 weeks pregnant, first trimester. That looks pretty good. All right, so we have that part. But I want to add in like the, oh shoot, what? How did I do that? 2,000? I don't even know what I clicked. Well, let's ignore that part for now. I don't even know. I feel like I changed something. Let's see. I don't know what I did. Okay, but so let's say I want to actually use the Web 5 part. So Web 5 has like this concept or this feature called the decentralized web node, and that's like your personal data store. You take your data with you, and you're able to decide who gets access to that data and when they get access to that data. Let's say that I don't know how to use this, right? For whatever reason. I know how because I work there. But let's say I'm new to it, and I'm like, dang, how would I implement this or get like maybe the weeks pregnant, the trimester, and like the due date to be saved in my personal data store? Yesterday, Josh Goldberg showed how you don't want to rely on Copilot or AI too heavily. I completely agree with that. I think you need to look at your documentation and mix it up with the AI a bit. So let's say I read the documentation, I'm like, I don't really get it, but I know that these code snippets are needed. What I normally do, and let me make this, it's so stretched out. No. Okay, right, so I'm going to put the code snippets in, right, that I know are needed. So I need this to connect to Web 5, and then I know that I need this to basically store or save records in my personal data store, so I could paste this as well. And then I could say, like, hey, GitHub Copilot, I want to save, so I'm going to say write, or I'm going to say store. I don't know why, but I feel like that might work better. So I'm going to say I want to store the due date and the weeks and the trimester in a Web 5 DWN. So hopefully Copilot Chat, that's what I'm using on the side, is able to use this. So it's giving me some step-by-step instructions. Hopefully it generates some code that I can just copy and paste. Cool. This looks pretty decent. I actually wanted it to generate it with the actual file, so I'm just going to highlight it and try one more time. Because I just want to copy and paste. I don't want to use my brain on stage. Let's see how much time we're on. 20, okay, 5 more minutes. Let's do this. All right, here we go. Yeah, I wanted the whole file so I could just paste it over. Cool, cool, cool. It's almost done. Okay. All right. It's still going. All right, perfect, perfect, perfect. All right, this is what I want. So I'm just going to highlight this, and I'm going to put this over here, close this so I can actually read everything. I made it super big for you guys, but it's a little bit of a struggle for me. All right, so I want to change this because it doesn't know the real import, so it like assumed how it would go. And I'll say from at Web5 API, and I'll just look at it real quick. I think everything should be right, but if not, we'll figure out. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. By the time that the 5 minutes hits, at least you guys got to see the process. So what I'm going to do, I think that the logic that it says is that like if I hit calc or I hit the date, what it's going to do is it's going to call this method and it's going to save these values in there. So let me see, does it have a console log? So I'll see if it works. How will I know? Let's see. Maybe I could put a console log right here. Yeah, and maybe I want to save this as a value called record. Record equals, and then I'll print this out. I hope I am making the right choice. Record.data.text is what I want to print out. Okay, so I am going to have the console be shown. All right, fingers crossed, y'all. And then we're going to click a random date. Hopefully it doesn't say 2000, whatever it said earlier. And okay, cool. Literally when I did it, I don't know if you guys, how big it is for you guys, but it says, I clicked it and it says pregnancy data stored, the due date, the weeks, blah, 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 blah. So it worked. Super excited about that. So I don't have too much to say after this, except thank you so much to CascadiaJS for giving me the room to speak. And if you wanted to connect with me or like tweet like this was like the best talk I ever heard in my life, if it was the worst, don't say anything. My handle is @BlackGirlBytes. All right, thank y'all.